Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to Threshold of Hope, where we bring you some of the writings of the church. And I'm going to say it at the outset, I know my coat looks a little blue, but like most men, I don't really distinguish dark blue and black. So apparently on the airplane this weekend, I picked up somebody else's jacket. I'll try to find them. But it's not your television sets that are going crazy. It's I who just don't know one color from another, especially in a dark airplane. All right, we're going through Fides et Ratio. You can, of course, get a paperback copy of it from EWTN's religious catalog, either by going to the website, EWTNreligiouscatalog.com, or you can call 1-800-854-6316. Or another option is to download a free electronic copy of Fides et Ratio by going to our EWTN.com, our main website, and in the document library, type in Fides et Ratio and download it into your computer. Now, of course, we want you to get involved and participate in our show. You can do like these nice folks have come. We have the ones who win the long distance award today come all the way from the island of Guam. That's far. And other folks here from the East Coast, Florida and Connecticut. And we'd love to have you come and join us too. Or you can send us a question by email, writing to threshold@EWTN.com, or call during our live broadcast, which is Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And the phone number for the live show is 1-800-221-9460 if you're here in North America. Or you can call from outside North America or from right here in Birmingham at 205-271-2980. All right, we are now ready to take a look at paragraph 59, which the topic we're dealing with is the church's present interest in philosophy, and that there's still an ongoing interest in philosophy. So he speaks about how after Pope Leo XIII, there was a revival of the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas, and also what they call neo-Thomistic revival. So people were studying him again. And it's not the only sign of the resurgence of philosophy in the culture of Christian inspiration. Earlier still, and parallel to Pope Leo's call, there had emerged a number of Catholic philosophers who adopted more recent currents of thought and, using specific methods, produced philosophical works of great influence and lasting value. Some of these desired syntheses so remarkable that they stood comparison with the great systems of idealism. Now, some of these, what systems are you talking about? Mostly, especially from his own background, the Pope was thinking about a school of philosophy known as phenomenology. And there were a number of philosophers in the school. His own favorite was Max Scheler, who did a fair amount of work on that. But there are a number of others. I myself had studied Maurice Merleau-Ponty, a Frenchman, and others have studied phenomenology as a philosophy, which tries to look and analyze the phenomena that appear. And idealism, remember, idealism says that you can't really know the external world. You only know your ideas about the world. Now that's a problem. If all you know is your ideas about the world and you don't really know the real world, what they'll say is, well, how do you know that that's a book? That's just your idea of a book. All right. How about if I hit you over the head with it? Will that convince you that it's more than an idea? It would convince me. And all I'm doing is carrying it. So the phenomenologists don't go with the idealist school. They say, look, phenomena are there. Things exist. And one of the key issues is that a lot of philosophers, especially beginning in the 1600s, were trying to say, how can we know the world objectively and get this absolutely objective perspective? And eventually they said, well, you can't. All you can do is get ideas. That's where that whole issue comes from. Phenomenologists said, look, you don't know the world absolutely objectively. You don't see it the way God sees it. God has an objective view. He sees things as they really are. But we each do have an ability to look at the real world. Now, we're going to see the phenomena, the things that really are there. And we also should admit we've got a perspective. So, for instance, the perspective of a biologist includes being able to look at the world through a microscope. And now they have super microscopes where you can see into, even smaller than, the virus or smaller than bacteria. They can see the tiniest things in chemistry. It's remarkable. Now, is that objective reality? No, it's still looking at the phenomena of science with a tool called a microscope. And that's a good perspective. That doesn't mean just because it's not the most objective point of view that it's wrong. And that's what phenomenologists would say. It's not wrong that you have a perspective, but just realize some of the limits and unpack what you see there. Take a look at the phenomena that are around you. Don't make them just your own ideas, but neither do you claim that it's absolute objectivity like God would have. It's what you are able to see. And they do a lot of things of what they like to call unpacking certain ideas and seeing what's going on from various perspectives. And that's, I found that helpful. And then other philosophers established epistemological foundations for a new consideration of faith. Now, what's epistemology? Epistemology comes from a couple Greek words that means the study of how you know something. Now, I just did epistemology with you, didn't I? I just did that. So that I was saying the epistemology talks about how do you know what you see through a microscope or through a telescope. Now, microscopes and telescopes go in opposite directions, don't they? Does that mean that the telescope is right and the microscope wrong? No, of course not. You're looking at very small things through a microscope, and you're looking at very far and sometimes very big things through a telescope. And as a matter of fact, there's been a lot of people in the church, because the papacy has had an astronomy observatory for centuries. And so it was a lot of priests who helped develop the telescopes. A lot of people don't realize that. But a lot of priests and a lot of Catholic lay people too, but a lot of priests were involved. And so you try to understand, well, what does that mean for how you know something? And again, the issue is does that mean that's the objective reality? No, it's the perspective you can gain when you look through a telescope. Now, when you look at the stars with the naked eye, is that a false image? No. It's the image that you can see with the naked eye. And that's a good perspective. And I know it's been almost 48 years since my last date, but I would rather look at the stars and the moon, just as they are, as I see them with my eyes. When I'm on a date, that's more romantic than trying to share a telescope with your date. I never did that. All right, honey, you look at it now. No, you look at it. No, let's just both look up at the sky, and look at the moon and the stars. That's romantic. Is that false? No. It's just another approach to these things. And it's also a good one. Now, matter of fact, I'd say it's a good one to continue after you get married. Keep looking up at the stars and the moon. Be romantic. But at any rate, so this is one of the areas that some philosophers have looked at, because this problem of being objective and knowing things objectively just kept going on. And now it's a lot more philosophers are resolving that. And at the same time, and this is one of his concerns, that by looking at this issue, what you know, you're trying to deal with the things that are right there in front of you, what he calls the imminent, the things that you perceive right in your presence. Well, and not only by sight, but also by smell, by taste, by touch, hearing. All those, that's right there, and that's imminent, it's right present to you. But these philosophers in the Catholic tradition were able to look at what's there in front of them and at the same time remain open to the transcendent. Now, what does he mean by that? The transcendent is something that goes beyond your limits of perception. For instance, let's just go back to the couple out there in the night sky, and they're looking at the beautiful stars and the moon. And, there they also realize that they have a love for each other that hopefully goes beyond the moon and the stars. That they hopefully, as a Catholic couple, that their love for each other is a love that has its ultimate source from God. And that they realize that God is the center of their relationship. And that he's calling them to holy matrimony. And that this is a love that's way beyond the stars. But again, it's nice to realize that under the stars and the moon. But while you're looking at the stars and the moon and feeling romantic toward each other, you also realize there's a deeper love than just those feelings. And that deeper love between a man and a woman opens the way for a lifelong commitment and relationship. So this is something where you're open to the transcendent, what's beyond, even with the moon and the stars, beyond the universe. And that's what you also want from a philosophy. You can see what's there in front of you, but you can also realize beyond what you see and experience, there is a God who makes all those things possible. This is part of what we want to do. And a lot of times, why did he have to say that? Well, there are some philosophies of science who try to teach the only thing that's real is what I can see in front of me. If I can't prove it by science, then it's not true. There are still some silly people who believe that. Well, at that point, I want to ask them, how can you prove that your mother loves you? Do you have an experiment for that? That's scientifically observable? Or do you make an act of faith that she loves you? And that you also gain a perspective over time that even when your mother disciplined you, said by someone who knows about that, that you realize later on, while it didn't feel good at the time, she did it because she loved you for the long range. And you can see even the discipline as part of her love. And so this is something that I can't prove by any scientific experiment. What a scientific experiment can do is say, when your mother feels nicely towards you, certain chemicals are active in her brain. When she is disciplining you because you're a fool and she's angry, then other chemicals might be emitted by her brain. But you still can't prove that she loves you. All that science could do is analyze the chemicals in your mother's brain. Your mother's love is something you make an act of faith in. And this is, and again, just because you can't prove it scientifically doesn't mean it's not true. And you don't want to limit all truth to science. Science has a wonderful and good realm. We need it, we use it, it's wonderful. But it's not the only perspective. There are others. And you want to bring that in too. And that's where that openness to God comes in. And also some philosophers tried to combine the demands of faith with the perspective of the phenomenological method. One of the chief of those, I would say, is Blessed John Paul himself. He was very much a Thomist and a phenomenologist. A lot of people don't realize he was a guest lecturer in philosophy at Harvard University. A lot of people, he didn't put that on his resume, but it's out there, and his list of publications is very long in philosophy. So he was someone doing this, but others were too. And so from different quarters then, modes of speculation by philosophers have continued to emerge and sought to keep alive the great tradition of Christian thought that unites faith and reason. In other words, we don't want, let philosophy develop, but let it develop in ways that really keep in mind the roles of reason, will, and faith. All of that being combined, that they don't have to exclude one another unless you come up with a philosophy that is too small. Don't make your philosophy too small. Catholic philosophy is open to wideness. It's remarkable. Now, paragraph 60. The Second Vatican Council offers rich and fruitful teaching about philosophy. Had a number of good perspectives. And he especially focuses on the Constitution on the Church in the modern world, which is called Gaudium et Spes in the Vatican documents. Gaudium et Spes means joy and hope. Okay? And this is a compendium of biblical anthropology. Now, what does he mean by anthropology? There's the science of anthropology that is studying ancient cultures and bones and things like that. But that's not what he means here. Here, anthropology also means the study of what it means to be human. What is distinctive about being human versus being an animal? And what makes us distinct from the others? Now, this is a very important issue because we have a lot of very foolish philosophies who keep trying to use ideas from science, like evolution, not so much about understanding the past and such, but they try to make a philosophy by which they reduce humans to being one more animal among others, like Darwin did. Remember that Darwin, you know, it's one thing to talk about his origin of the species, but remember what I've said many times. In his Descent of Man, he goes into philosophy, and he says some horrible things philosophically about what it means to be human. For instance, not knowing about DNA and a lot of other things we know today, he wrote that all Africans are a species in between the ape and the human being, and they're not humans, and that they need to be bred out. Now, that is an evil teaching, and it's a superficial understanding of what it means to be human. For him, human means to be Caucasian, apparently. Well, that's dumb, totally, and wicked when applied by various philosophers. So we want to understand what is the biblical notion of anthropology, and that we are not reducing any group to the animal, nor are we reducing all the human race to the animal level. But we're seeing what is distinctive about humans from the other animals. In fact, we do share some DNA with the ape family, but we also have DNA they can't get. And we are radically different than they are. Try reading. Go down to your local zoo and try reading the apes' version of Hamlet. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing, because if it was, it'd be a human being that wrote it for the apes. I think the apes are cool, don't get me wrong. I love the large monkey house at Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. I love that place. But, you know, it's, they're not humans. Now, what does the Bible teach about anthropology, about being human? From which philosophy can also be inspired. Philosophy can learn from that biblical perspective. And that's why Gaudium et Spes deals with the value of the human person as created in the image and likeness of God. That's the key biblical perspective. Humans are created in the image and likeness of God. The animals are not. They're good. God said they're good, but they're not made in his image and likeness the way humans are. And that perspective is something that we have to begin with. We see in that there is a dignity and superiority of the human being over the rest of creation. That we are above all the animals. Now again, there are modern philosophers. There's a moral philosophy professor at Yale University who tries to teach that the human being has no more rights than the cockroach. It's one of the quotes. The cockroaches at my house better not find that out. No, it's not true. Of course it's absurd. And that's why he wants to reduce the population of the world to 5 million, which was the level of population at the Chalcolithic period, about 5000 BC. So that's his goal. And we say, no, human beings are superior to the rest of the creation. And that human reason has a capacity to go beyond its limits. That's a transcendent capacity. So that the human reason can think way beyond your own experience and think about what's been done in science. Is it not truly astounding that human reason by itself could think about, I mean, even the Greeks had figured out that the earth was round back in ancient times and they figured out roughly the size because they saw the shadow of the earth during a lunar eclipse. And they figured out from the ratio of the shadow of the earth to the curvature of the moon how big the earth was. And they were close. They were close. That's remarkable. And this is why Gaudium et Spes says in paragraph 14 and 15, though made of body and soul, man is one. Through his bodily composition, he gathers to himself the elements of the material world. Thus, they reach their crown through him, and through him raise their voice in free praise of the Creator. Give an example. Rocks are great, but they really are better expressing the glory of God when you make them into a Gothic cathedral. It's prettier than laying on the ground. Anyway, so he is obliged, the man is obliged, to regard his body as good and honorable, since God has created it and will raise it up on the last day. And by the way, when you think about that, how the body itself is something that you treat with respect. That's one of the reasons, among many, that you don't look at pornography and treat your body or other people's bodies as objects for your pleasure. No, you need to realize every person that you see there is destined for glory with God. Or if they reject it and reject God, they go over to the darkness. And as Daniel says, they become an eternal horror. So this is something about the dignity of the body that's important. We go on in Gaudium et Spes. Now man is not wrong when he regards himself as superior to bodily concerns and as more than a speck of nature or nameless constituent of the city of man. So in other words, your body is important, but there are some values more important even than your body. For instance, how many people have put themselves in danger of death and then died because it was more important to take care of their children than to live themselves? Mothers and fathers have done that over the centuries. Various patriots have done that for their country, and so on. Man judges rightly that by his intellect he surpasses the material universe, for he shares in the light of the divine mind. So the planets can be better understood by us, but they won't understand us better. By relentlessly employing his talents through the ages, man has indeed made progress in the practical sciences and in technology and the liberal arts. We're learning more, we're getting more accomplished, and we do beauty. Still, he has always searched for more penetrating truths, and he finds them. In other words, God gave us a mind capable of keep on searching and studying. And this is part of our gift. So the problem of atheism is also dealt with in Gaudium et Spes. This is before atheism became a big business like it is today. And the flaws of the philosophical vision in atheism are identified, especially the flaws in relation to the dignity and the freedom of the human person. This is one of the key elements. On one hand, I read and hear the atheists boasting how we are the cutting edge of evolution and we are ahead of everybody else and you will just have to catch up to us. But meanwhile, in fact, the atheists and secularists are extraordinarily dangerous people. They are the ones responsible for the killing of 305 million people in the 20th, between 1914 and 1990. And they haven't stopped. So that's Gaudium et Spes speaks to that in paragraph 20 and 21. Modern atheism often takes on a systematic expression, like in Marxism, which, in addition to other causes, stretches the desires for human independence to such a point that it poses difficulties against any kind of dependence on God. That's what they don't want to do, is say that they're dependent on God. Those who profess atheism of this sort maintains that it gives man freedom to be an end unto himself. In other words, human beings live for their own existence. They don't live for God, they live for themselves. Atheists claim that this freedom cannot be reconciled with the affirmation of a Lord who is the author and purpose of all things. I don't know why they see that. That makes no sense. That, having myself as a purpose is actually going to reduce me. And one of the things that we see atheists do, why did they kill so many people? By the way, Christian wars of religion in 2,000 years are 2.5 million people. Whereas atheists and secular wars of the 85 years of the 20th century are 305 million. Big contrast. Why? Because they say we're the goal, but my ideas about the goal are what's important. And I'm not answerable to anybody but to me. So if I have to kill some people, they'll even use the old phrase, you have to break some eggs to make an omelet. By eggs, they mean human heads. And this is evil. So it goes on in Gaudium et Spes. Not to be overlooked among the forms of modern atheism is that which anticipates the liberation of man, especially through his economic and social emancipation. That was the promise, by the way, of National Socialism, the Nazis, and of communism. Both of them were big government socialist agendas. This form argues that by its nature, religion thwarts this liberation by arousing man's hope for a deceptive future life in heaven. That's what they see. You don't care about this world, you only care about the next world. And thereby, they fear that Christians who believe in heaven are diverting man from the construction of the earthly city. So you don't care about this world, you're scared to go to heaven. Consequently, when the proponents of this doctrine, especially with Marxism and Nazism alike, when they gain governmental power, they vigorously fight against religion, and they promote atheism by using, especially in the education of youth, those means of pressure which public power has at its disposal. Now, that was what they did in communist Russia, in Nazi Germany. But don't you see that that's also going on in the United States by the hand of the courts, where discussion of God, the influence of Christianity on our culture, are forbidden? It's not easy to talk. And then, apart from just talking about the historical facts of Christianity's influence on the founding of the United States, on the building of European culture, besides not talking about that, try saying a prayer in a public school or in a public venue. And then you watch how they come after you from the courts. So this is not just the communists. It goes on. It goes on. There is no doubt that the climactic section of Gaudium et Spes chapter on philosophy is significant for philosophy. And that's why he talked about in his encyclical, Redemptor Hominis, which serves as the constant reference points of my teaching. In other words, he says, as he quotes Gaudium et Spes 19, it is his most commonly quoted section of the Vatican II documents. And he says this in Redemptor Hominis, paragraph 8 from 1979. The truth is that only in the mystery of the incarnate Word does the mystery of man take on light. For Adam, the first man, was a type of him who was to come, Christ the Lord. Christ, the new Adam, is the very revelation of the mystery of the Father and his love, and fully reveals man to himself and brings to light his most high calling. This is one of the things where the communists, the Nazis, and others were absolutely wrong. When they tried to say that, oh, you people just care about heaven and don't care about this world, and so you neglect this world. Nonsense. This is the kind of stupidity atheists try to bring on people's minds by neglecting the reality of history. It was precisely because the saints wanted to be with God face to face that they saw Jesus Christ in the least of their brothers, in the least of their sisters. And therefore, it was the Catholic Church that invented the concepts and institutions of hospitals. And nuns and monks and priests staffed them. The Catholic Church invented the medical school at the universities of medieval Europe. Their medicine was primitive, but they had medical schools that didn't exist prior to that. It was the church that invented the university. It was the monks who invented all kinds of things and passed on literature and knowledge. Again, make sure you get a hold of some of the way the books that exist. Al Cresta, the radio host, has just come up with a brand new book on, and one of the things he deals with are the ways Catholics did science, promoted it, taught it, and changed the institutions of society. And Thomas Woods has done the same thing in his book on the influence of Catholicism. And why did we do it instead of the Protestants? Well, the Protestants weren't there yet. I'm sure they would have come up with a lot of things. But, in fact, these things were invented when it was only the Catholics in the West. And so because we look forward to heaven, we know that we have an accounting from God for what we do here on earth. And we seek to do greater good than the atheists because we know we're held to account. They do it because they feel the nobility obliges them. We do it because God obliges us. And I still think there are more Catholic soup kitchens than atheist soup kitchens. Take account and see. All right, we'll be back in just a couple minutes. Please stay with us. Thank you, and welcome back. First of all, I want to welcome you to come and join us on pilgrimage here to EWTN. If you can make it, please contact our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966. Or you can go to the website, EWTN.com, and they'll give you all kinds of information about scheduling for the masses, the programs, and the tours of the studio, and make sure that you get a chance to come to any one of those, as well as information on how to get up to Hansville, places to stay, and places to visit around here, places to eat. We still, even though it's Great Lent, we still let you eat. You get fried green tomatoes. So come on and join us. We'd love to have you here. And it's still pretty here up there, isn't it? It's really nice. This poor lady over here is from Connecticut. We have a few more flowers than they do in Connecticut, right? Yes. All right. Now, before we get to your questions and the emails, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the death of a Dutch Jesuit priest yesterday. Yesterday morning, in the Civil War ravaged city of Homs, Syria, Father Frans van der Lucht, S.J., died early yesterday morning. A masked gunman broke into the Jesuit residence in the old city of Homs, and he wounded a guard, dragged Father van der Lucht outside, and shot him twice in the head. Just killed him. Now, van der Lucht had been living in Syria for almost 50 years. He was a psychologist. He worked in education with handicapped people. Didn't matter to him if they were Christians or Muslims. He wanted to help people with various handicaps. He was respected by almost everybody because of his solidarity with the residents of this rebel-held area. Now, Homs has been the target of constant shelling for almost 2 years by his government, but he refused to leave. He would not leave. The people, the handicapped couldn't leave, so he wasn't going to leave. And he stayed there with the shelling, even as the population of the old city of Homs was just really made small. The Christian community has shrunk from tens of thousands till today. Only 66 Christians are left in the city. And Father van der Lucht was quoted as saying this about the Syrian people. Quote, "They have given me so much kindness, inspiration, and everything I have. If the Syrian people are suffering now, I want to share their pain and their difficulties." Now, there's no way to not see him as a martyr of charity and of the faith. And the 75-year-old priest should have just been able to serve his people in peace. But a 75-year-old priest taking care of the handicapped was seen as a threat by this terrorist. Now, it is our task as Christians to pray for that man who did this murder. I have no doubt that Father van der Lucht is already praying for them in heaven. Now, martyrs, by the way, generally get to skip purgatory. So God bless him. But I'm sure he's praying for the man that murdered him. He probably, I wouldn't be surprised if that man ever has the courage to take off his mask and come forward. I'll bet he heard the words, "I forgive you." I'll bet he heard that. And we are called to do the same and pray for that man's conversion to Jesus Christ, who can bring him reconciliation and authentic forgiveness for this and any of the other crimes he has done. And this is very, very important. We also want to keep praying for the two the bishops, a Greek Orthodox and a Syrian Orthodox bishop, who were captured. Their driver, a deacon, was murdered, and they're still not found. Nobody knows where they are. Want to pray for them to come back safely to their people. But also want to pray for 2 Italian priests and a Canadian nun, Father Gian Antonio Allegri, Father Giampaolo Marta, and Sister Gilberta Bissiere. They were kidnapped on Saturday in northern Cameroon. No one has claimed responsibility for the kidnapping, but what they think is that the kidnappers belong to Boko Haram. Boko Haram is a group that is a Muslim terrorist group, and they've done a lot of killings all over Nigeria, especially. You're from Nigeria. You're well aware of them. And they have done a lot of killing, especially of people who became Christians or of Christians who helped converts. And so we want to pray for them that they too might come to an authentic conversion to Jesus Christ and seek his forgiveness for this, and that they would also set free these priests, the nun, and any of the lay people that they attack as well. So keep all these areas in your prayers. We have a caller. Hello, Scott?
Scott? Yeah.
Yeah, Scott. Where are you at?
How you doing?
Fine. Where are you from?
I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, great. Good. And what's your question?
Well, I'm a musician, and I'm a brand new Catholic. I just got confirmed last year.
Okay, welcome.
And long story short, EWTN was a contributing factor of me converting, because the Rosary and Mother Angelica just really touched me in so many ways, and your program as well. I'm a big fan.
And
my main question is, what is the difference between mortal sin and venial sin? Because I sometimes, being a musician, I find myself, in some pretty sticky situations.
Yeah.
And I don't always have a priest available, and this promotes a lot of anxiety sometimes. If I were to, something were to happen to me, and if I had that sin on my soul,
right.
Would an act of contrition be enough?
Okay, couple things. They have a couple questions there, Scott. First of all, let's deal with the difference between venial sin and mortal sin.
Yes.
Venial sin is something of a less serious nature, while mortal sin has a very serious or grave matter to it. So again, a good example would be stealing a pack of gum from a huge grocery store chain is not going to break their bank. It's wrong. It's a sin.
Right.
But you don't do them serious harm. And that would be a venial sin, and you still have to pay it back, by the way. A mortal sin would be, say, if you stole $1,000 from that same store. That's a grave matter. But see, and this is one of the things too. Think of another situation. You see a man who's homeless, living on the street, and he's got a few bucks, and you mug him and steal the few bucks. That would be a grave sin, because that's all he has to live on. And that becomes, well, it's, say, $5 for him. And you say, objectively, that's a small amount. But for him, it's all he's got. And that becomes a grave sin because of its effect on that guy's life. So these are the kinds of issues you have to weigh. And then another element of mortal sin is that you have to know that it is grave matter. So if you take a look at the book, Oliver Twist,
right,
where Fagin taught the boys that it was good to steal and give him the stuff. So their conscience is distorted by bad teaching, and they don't have full awareness. Now they know it's wrong, but they don't have full awareness of how wrong it is. Whereas somebody who knows that something is wrong and does it anyway is culpable. Okay? So if you, again, you see the guy living on the street, and you know all he's got is $5, but I want that $5, so I'm going to take it. I don't care if he goes hungry. You are fully aware of the seriousness. Thirdly, you also have to make an act of the will to do that sin. So say, some of these places you go, you might have a situation where there are drinks being served, alcohol. If you have a drink, that's not bad. But if you know that if I drink 5 beers or whatever it is your limit is, and then you're going to get drunk, you know ahead of time that you'll get drunk, and being drunk is a serious sin. And so then you have to say, I can't do that. If you go ahead and do it, then it would be mortal sin. Now, in terms of the other part, very important, yes, do make an act of contrition if you do commit a sin, but then do so with the sense, as soon as I get a chance to go to a priest, I'm going to confess my sin. Okay? And then, one of the things that we ask in confession is that you try to remove yourself, make an amendment to remove yourself from the near occasions of sin. So, for instance, if you're an alcoholic, say, well, the only job I can get is as a bartender. That's not necessarily a good idea. You might have to say, Lord, what would you want me to do to get out of the near occasion of temptation and sin? So that would be a good idea too. Pray for you to, maybe find something that you say, wait a minute, there's might be a straightening out of things here that I can do yet. But God bless you, and good questions. As a matter of fact, what you may want to do, get a hold of my book called Go in Peace, which is about confession and these issues. You can take a look at that and get it from EWTNReligiousCatalog.com. All right, we have another caller. Hello, Patricia, you're on the line.
Yes, Father, thank you. First of all, I'd like to offer my condolences to your fallen Jesuit brother, and we'll all be praying for him, no doubt.
Yes.
Father,
thank you very much.
Yes, sir. My question regards purgatory, rather a follow-up, I guess. Could you tell me, please, if someone has lived an obviously exemplary Catholic Christian life and for 47 years, and over the past few months has sadly had a lapse in judgment and found herself in a state of mortal sin for several months, and on the way to confession, this would be my sister, so I know her well.
Okay.
She confided in me.
Mm-hmm.
She was blindsided by a car. She was hit by a car. Mm-hmm. She was killed.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And I was wondering, God in his infinite wisdom, is he able to look at the 46 or so years that preceded these few months?
Patricia, let me get to something that I learned from Sister Saul, Sister Cordelia, Sister Ida, and all the other teachers I had, Sister Danielle too.
Yes.
They taught us very clearly. It's not only the many years that she done. That can be undone by a life of sin. But what God really sees is that she was on her way to go to confession. That means she had already repented.
Oh.
She had already, come to realize in her heart that she was in the wrong. And she was going to seek reconciliation and forgiveness in the sacrament. But she died on the way. I guarantee you that with that amendment of repentance, God finished up that confession after she died, and that she is with him in paradise, or at least in purgatory. So, I don't know, I don't want to declare somebody a saint or in purgatory. That's management. I'm in sales. I don't know that stuff. But that is considered already forgiven as she's on her way. And confession would bring the sacramental grace to her, but clearly in that situation, she'd be forgiven. And this was taught to me way back in the 50s, right? Some of us remember that. This is the way Catholic teaching is. But another limitation that we're coming up with is the end of our time today. So may Almighty God bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you and lead you in all your ways, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. And again, I'd like to remind you that we need to remind you, this is your network. Please keep some in between your gas bill and your cable bill so we can pay our bills too. Thank you, and God bless.